The county executive for Cuyahoga County. He is Chris Ronayne, kind enough to stop by on a holiday weekend. Let's make sure your mic is on over there. There we go. Chris, appreciate you coming in.
Daryl, good to be with you. I got to be face-to-face with you. And by the way, it's great to see this downtown busy on a Sunday morning. People are walking everywhere. I walked in the doors here in the Halley building. Family left. They said, well, you're here for a wedding, a bunch of kids with them. I said, no, we just came to Cleveland to have a good time. And they did.
I thought you were going to talk about all the midges outside.
It is midge season. You remember that Yankees game where they
Jabba Chamberlain?
God, that was great.
Oh yeah.
But no, it's good to see you. You know, we're neighbors. My county building is right next door to you, so good to be down here.
Well, obviously, you're not here for hugs and kisses. I appreciate you for coming in. We obviously see things differently. However, I'm a believer in talking to people. I'm a believer in allowing folks to express their points of view without it being nasty. Is there any way I can negotiate a ceasefire between you, the downtown people, can we just I don't know, calm down on the statements right now?
Before I go forward, I do want to say just quickly to the men and women in service, thank you for your service. This is Memorial Day weekend, and I think we go off to our barbecues on Monday unless we forget what it's all about, those who made the ultimate sacrifice to our country. And so I just want to say that to men and women of service now and past and present. So listen, it has been tense, obviously, but there's a lot at stake. You know, this is a generational decision. This is the future of our city, our county, and our region. It's frankly the future of the Cleveland Browns and their fans. And I think that we are understandably really, really right now in a time that, there is tense talks because this is a tense moment. And a lot of things get said across the bow. Some things the Browns have said to me that I don't particularly appreciate. We got a letter May 15th that said that we were not using accurate information. All my information tracks with a group called the Legislative Service Commission downstate in Columbus. They're the body, the fiscal analysts that advise the state legislature. We have been lockstep. What we said 40 days before they did, back March 19th, when I held a press conference, I said Brook Park is overly risky. The exact words the Legislative Service Commission, the body that advises the state legislature, use exact words, overly risky. The governor's Office of Budget Management has said the same thing. So when you get down to it, what is a public official? First of all, your word is your bond. All you have is your reputation and trust with the people. So to have been said that somehow that was violated, we had to shoot back. And I did. And I went tete-a-tete with Dave Jenkins, the COO over at the Browns, and said, look, he also said to us, you don't need our money. That's your tax dollars, Daryl. That's mine. That's everybody listening out here, at least as they live in Cuyahoga County. So we're going to hold him to it. You don't need our money. You said it in the letter May 15th. And we said right back at him, then don't use our money, because it is a risky venture. And there's a lot more at stake. But the biggest thing that I got to do is protect taxpayers from getting into a bad deal. And every fan in the land ought to know that. Whether you're for Brook Park or whether you're for staying downtown, whether you're for a dome or not, I've always said this is about none of this. This is actually about everybody's downtown. It's not about Brook Park versus Cleveland, Cleveland versus Brook Park. It's about one downtown that we have and we share in this region. And as far as the dome goes, we should keep having conversations about where that goes. The downtown is not exclusive to not having a dome. You can have that too. So full circle, yes, we respond to claims that frankly were false claims, and we call them on it. We hold them to their words that say, we don't need your money. Why for a year and a half have you been saying that you need the public's treasury to do this deal? If you don't need it, then frankly, that was just a way to pick our pocket. So I'm holding them to it. So my first job is hold the treasury in good stead for the taxpayers and don't put taxpayers in risk. My second job is to argue what's right in the region. Of course, I represent Brook Park and Cleveland, both two wonderful cities out of 59 in our community. I represent them all. But I have to think about what's best for the region at large. And that's where my position is, to stay downtown.
One of my biggest contentions with this whole thing is I have always hated the fact that stadium is where it's at. I think it is the worst place imaginable to build a stadium. I think it's a waste of land. I'm a believer that should be a world-class destination. It has sat that way for nearly 30 years. And I'll be honest with you, I have no trust and belief that even if the Browns do stay down there, that's ever going to change down there. Because I, having lived in Northeast Ohio for almost 5 decades, I've been hearing it for 5 decades, all these grandiose plans with that lakefront. So I think that's the original sin. That the project wasn't done right in the first place, which brings us to now.
Can I respond to that a little
sure.
bit? I just got to give you my takes, and I appreciate the exchange. Listen, we built that stadium back when it was Municipal Stadium in the 1930s. In 1936 and 37, coming off the Great Depression, 7 million people showed up to Cleveland, Ohio for something called the Great Lakes Expo. And we did an incredible exhibition about innovation in the future right around Cleveland Stadium. The memories of that place go deep. You know, the first boxing match that was held there was before everything else, before there was baseball and football played there. Football came along in 1946, almost 80 years ago. And listen, the World Series of Rock, how many people remember the great concerts? I know Chris Harsh was talking about this on an earlier program. I was at the Rolling Stones this summer. I was at Billy Joel this past summer.
I remember the Rock Hall concert when that opened that they had there.
Absolutely, for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame opening. So this place has history. We have seen great things happen around it. I think we're judging it as a moment in time. And frankly, we're jumping the shark here. We're getting too early with our conclusions that this place can't be great with a stadium. It has been in the past.
3 decades is a long time for being stuck in a moment of time, though.
I will say to you, though, you look at what's happened around Gateway, and we're here in the Gateway neighborhood right now where we sit. It's been amazing. There's more development happening around Gateway because of the presence of the ballparks. I was out in University Circle after being at the city, and people want to be around interesting places. We built 5,000 homes around the Cleveland Museum of Art and Severance Hall. This will happen on this Great Lake, especially as we cleaned up the river, especially as you see a second phase of the Rock Hall. We're about to get a new port director. We need to work with that person to say, look, we got to work together on the right use of land down on the harbor front. But there's a lot about to happen, and the Haslam's were there. My question is, why'd they flinch? Why'd they flinch? And I know some of them, the staff's out listening today. Why'd they flinch? Because you guys had a plan that we pitched together to the state and got the infrastructure money to make this thing happen, and then you pulled out on us.
You want to know why they flinched?
Well, they haven't told me themselves. What do you say
they went to Minnesota? They saw what the Vikings built.
I've seen it.
And
I've seen it.
And I think that they said to themselves, yeah, we want.
I was up in Hennepin County last year, Minneapolis, and I saw the exact same stadium. In fact, I've referenced it. You know the difference between their plan and our plan? That's in the downtown. Indianapolis,
they also have
Minneapolis, Detroit, Atlanta. Everybody is going back to what Cleveland created the national model for. That national model was 3 major league sports stadia and ballparks and arenas within walking distance of each other. That's why Detroit's doubled down with the Lions and the Pistons and brought them back downtown. People are seeing that an interesting place is somewhere that somebody wants to live, and it's something that actually attracts visitors to a place. And that's what we got to keep the momentum going. This thing about pulling away from each other, you said it at the outset of this program. Let's sit back down. Anytime the Haslam's want to come back to the table and talk about what they originally proposed, let's sit down together rather than make this bull rush to the legislature, who's frankly confused when they look up north and they see all these different points of view. And they're, I think, funding a boondoggle with $600 million of your state tax dollars. They're funding something that is already been said by their own fiscal analyst, Legislative Service Commission, is too risky. We don't know what's going to happen to state income tax. There's one gubernatorial candidate already out saying he's going to end it. Well, this plan out in Brook Park is very much built on income tax receipts, right? What if that goes away? They've doubled the bed tax estimates out in Brook Park. Just because you build this, you think you double the county bed tax out there? Everything they've shown is actually a fallacious model. So I'm saying stay home, Cleveland Browns. Jimmy and D, if you want to make your real legacy in Cleveland, don't create a civil war between fans and 2 towns. Do what's best for the region. Stay with us for the long haul, like Dan Gilbert and Paul Dolan have done, and they've doubled down on a place that we helped in a public-private partnership build.
This process has been ongoing since the Frank Jackson administration. It was the worst-kept secret in town that the Browns were exploring alternative stadium sites. The new county jail, I believe, is going up on Transportation and 480. The Browns
they looked at that site.
They looked at that site. Yep. They looked at Independence, where years ago Mark Shapiro, the old president of the then Cleveland Indians, explored. Hey, what if when that lease at the ballpark? What if we go out to Independence, more central to our fans? That obviously died a quick death, thankfully.
Well,
but my point is the post office site. Yeah. My dad worked for the post office, and one of his jobs was like building maintenance and like overseeing where they're located and all that. So I know what it takes to move a post office. It ain't easy. It takes a long time. So they looked at a bunch of sites, and everybody knew that they were looking at sites. So my question to you with that whole long rambling intro is, why didn't anyone engage the Browns 5, 6, 7 years ago?
Well, look, where I was 5, 6, 7 years ago was in University Circle. We were busy building 5,000 homes out there. I actually got a call from City Hall. They said, take a look at this with us. And I did. We're worried about traffic. I said, traffic's going to find its way to University Circle. Don't worry about it. Stick with your plan downtown. But you mentioned a number of things just a minute ago. I remember when Dan Gilbert came to town and bought the Cavs. I met him the first night of the first game. I was with him. And I said, Dan, two things. One, I'm a hockey fan. I said, can you get a hockey team? He had it in a year. Next year, he had a hockey team, which I always thank him for. But second, we took a shot on pitching him on practice courts. And what we had proposed is a cross Huron right next to the arena when it was then the Q. And it was a little bit like Indianapolis with the Fieldhouse model. And you could create entertainment venues in it. You could create housing, which we showed above. We actually got LeBron James on the phone about this. Well, they went out to Independence. They came back 20 years later. This was 20 years ago. I pitched him on this. He came back 20 years later, and his staff said to me, "There's the one thing he thought got away from him," and he brought it back downtown. That's what I don't want to see happening with the Cleveland Browns in 20, 25 years is, we made a mistake. We should be back downtown. Why didn't we listen to Richfield or anything else? Richfield, look, I had a good time out there like you probably did, but there's nothing there. There was a burger shop and no hotels were ever built. Nothing else
That's true.
ever happened.
There was only one way in and one way out.
Exactly. So listen to history, guys. And I think the Haslam's got a bit of a learning curve coming from another place, but we love people that come to try to invest in our town from other places. I appreciate that with Jimmy and Dee Haslam. It's just a deal needs to be fair. And think about what your fans are saying and think about what the legacy of the city is. So I really, really think that, one, there is a great future on this lakefront with the stadium itself. And there also, two, is a history now of people realizing that sports matters to downtown. As offices sort of flooded out after the COVID exodus and people started remote commuting, what we rely on today is arts and culture, sports, and residents downtown.
Chris Ronayne, he is the executive for Cuyahoga County, joining us in studio as we comb through the current state of affairs between the county, the Cleveland Browns, the city of Cleveland, and the Cleveland Browns. And quite frankly, none of it's really good right now. It's your own admission. It's gotten real tense here.
The chamber didn't help us. For the greater Cleveland partnership, emphasize Cleveland in that partnership. They went the other way. And I don't think it's the whole board. I think it is a few that made a decision on behalf of all. And I think that they all really regret it because the business chamber, more than anybody, has over these years helped us create what you see, the Huntington Convention Center, the Hilton Hotel next door. Those were all things I was a part of it back at the city of Cleveland, but we're not finished yet, right? Got to finish this picture. And you pull this big asset out of that visitor infrastructure. People come to this town and they look around, they say, who knew? I see it all the time with visitors. We punch above our weight. Thank you, David Gilbert, Cleveland Sports Commission, Women's NCAA Final Four. You bring in the Pan Am Masters games. We've got a bid out for the Special Olympics. These are heads and beds that come from everywhere. And they look around, they see a stadium, a lake, a rock hall, a ballpark, an arena, all that they can walk to. Why are we pulling this away? Why are we deflating this balloon?
Joining me in studio, he's the county executive for Cuyahoga County, Chris Ronayne, kind enough to take time out of his busy schedule and time on the grill. You got stuff on the grill, right?
Yeah, we do.
What are we cooking?
In two ways. Well, you got to have brats in Cleveland.
Right,
come on.
right.
Stadium mustard, that's the greatest. I gave a shout out to our servicemen and women and our vets. On a lighter note, my son Joe, he's 15. He's listening. He's a freshman at St. Ignatius. He beat me. We played a little golf this morning out at Washington Park, a little 3-par. My short game sucks. So he took me about 5 strokes. Hi, Joe, out there. Also, Nicholas Mullingray, he just graduated St. Edward's High School. He's got Down syndrome. He's my neighbor. Because of St. Ed's and the goodness of St. Ed's, they found a path for him to graduate, and he's on his way to Kent State next year. He's just a hero in our story and in our neighborhood.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Thank you.
Let's get back into it. How much Bedrock is set to invest? I think it's $3.5 billion. They got that tax increment financing for the riverfront. We didn't get a phase 2 casino, but we're getting a beautiful practice facility, Cleveland Clinic Sports Performance Center. They're going to top that off here in a couple of weeks. How much does, because I think it was Brent Larkin, he wrote something to the effect of a lot of business leaders are very worried that if the Haslams do this development in Brook Park, that it's going to damage future downtown development. And I guess my question is, how much of that does that weigh into the your process as far as support, no support for a project when you have a $3.5 billion commitment to the riverfront. You might, if the Browns do go to Brook Park, there's that. And then the lakefront gets open for development. Is it too much?
Well, the answer directly is no. It doesn't influence my thinking on whether or not to get into the discussions with the Browns. What does is the risk to the taxpayers, and also just the thinking that having a third major sports team downtown does help. That's the additive part. The Browns keep using the word additive when they talk about Brook Park. The additive is having you downtown. But let me say this. I mean, I don't think the Cavs and the Bedrock companies get enough credit in this town for all they've done. I mean, Dan Gilbert has adopted this as his second home outside of Michigan, and he's proven it. Billions of dollars on the waterfront. What they've done with the arena, what they've done with the team, what they've done with the staff to give every staff member a ring on a championship occasion was just, a class act. But I think that riverfront development is frankly going to make all of the downtown better. It's going to make the casino environs, I think, better. I think you're going to see that cascading down to the river with a boardwalk and kayaking and, all the stuff that they got planned down there. And then the Cavs practice facilities, as Chris Harsh said in the earlier program, feet on the floor matter, feet on the field matter, because to us, it's income tax. One of the reasons I was pitching Dan on a practice courts years ago was we wanted to keep the feet in Cleveland, right? Because that income tax stream helps with our streets and helps with our bridges and everything else, So listen, it is important to keep the core together. And you mentioned Minneapolis, and I saw it where the Vikings play, and I said, man, what a boon to the city, when it's on their transit line.
When did you go there by again, real quick?
It was last year.
Okay.
And I mean, that's what I think the Browns are missing, is be a part of something bigger than you. And actually, it's going to pay more dividend to you in time. Your fans aren't going to be mad at you. Your city's going to, reinvest in you. I mean, it's gotten to a point, Daryl. It is sad to see the dialogue in the ditch. It is sad, even, whether it's the public officials, whether it's the private business chamber, or whether it's the fans themselves. I mean, we're in a civil war over this thing. And I just want to see people get back to the whole. The mayor has rightly said there is the shore to core to shore plan. There is the river and the lake with the core of the downtown in between. And I believe that. I'm focused personally a lot on the Cuyahoga River. It's in our name with the Cuyahoga County, but we're working on the Veterans Memorial Bridge. Again, thanks to our veterans, especially this weekend as we remember. But that bridge is going to be an incredible journey under the bridge, looking over the river valley. Irishtown Bend on the river. That's going to be a great park cascading down from Ohio City. Canal Basin Park tells the history of not only our city but of America. When Cleveland was the fulcrum between New York and Louisiana, when the canal boats came through. We're going to create that park in the top of the flats. It's going to be the gateway to the national park. Keep saying to the Browns, why not be a part of this success?
You pitched Burke Lakefront Airport along with some other local leaders back when the Browns made the announcement that, hey, we're going to go ahead and focus on the Brook Park thing. My question to you is this. Burke's not going to be available for about another 12 to 15 years, closer to 12, hopefully, than the 15. It's going to take $300 to $500 million to limp the current stadium to that window. By the time you build that dome, you're talking probably double the cost of the $2.4 billion that's been proposed now. And I'm not naive. I don't think that the Browns will do it for 2.4. It's going to cost more. They said they're going to handle the overruns there. Why does that make more fiscal sense for taxpayer Joe sitting here to pour $500 million into an existing stadium, get it to the finish line, then to spend $4+ billion, which, by the way, does not include the infrastructure improvement that's going to be required, because you can't get to the thing. You can't get to the existing stadium. But why does that make better sense for Northeast Ohio when you're talking about tax? Because I'm guessing, I don't want to put words in your mouth, I'm guessing if that were the Browns' plan, the county would be willing to spend some money.
And I told Jimmy Haslam and Dee Haslam that exactly, because it's good money after good, not bad money after, good money after bad. Daryl, by the way, thanks for being a taxpayer, and all the taxpayers out there, we appreciate you.
Hey, I got my statement from the bank 2 days ago. The taxes have been paid.
We appreciate you and everybody else listening that pays their taxes. And I take you seriously. How do we target our investments that make the most sense for your tax dollars and for your yield? Let me just go over what I think is the win-win. I would, if I were the Haslams, I'd hold on to that option in Brook Park. I'd work with Mayor Orcutt to actually activate that site for maximum income tax potential for our region. I think the Greater Cleveland Partnership should have been looking at that before they endorse it for a football stadium site that, is not going to generate the kind of tax that a new manufacturing site. Look, we see from Washington the move to onshore to reshore businesses here. We got the greatest site in the state of Ohio at 180 acres off the interstate next to the airport. It can be used also for airport expansion in the future. What we're talking about with NASA in the Arizona, there's a lot of there between manufacturing and aviation at that site. Now flip back to downtown. We did say to the Haslams that we would play if they were downtown because it is a smart bet. And one, I think the structural analysis says that the bowl is strong, it's sound, but it's the exterior and about $117 million of improvement needs, which is
the entire plumbing system needs replaced.
Right. Which frankly is also what the Cavs need actually for the arena. And that's actually the guards. I mean, we're talking numbers that are on par with the other two teams, right? So we have said if that voter approved, that's a very important underline, syntax were to come to fruition, we would flow it to downtown's stadia to help him make those improvements and help the city of Cleveland make those improvements.
Can you, by the way, can I pause you for a second? Can you?
Absolutely.
Because the syntax money is not generating enough money. I know the county had to kick in $20 million. Right. The city had to kick in $20 million for Gateway alone. More money is going to be required in future years. That's what I've been told. So you're not done writing checks. Right. I get it. Is there thought of including weed in the syntax instead of raising the existing thresholds because of legalization? And I know the folks down in Columbus, some of them really want to get real restrictive on that, but we voted and said we want it. Is there any thought to adding marijuana into the syntax?
Yeah, it's definitely in my head. By the way, we're all mindful that no tax is a fun tax, right? No matter what, for any consumer good. But with that being said, there is a lot of fun to be had at the stadiums, right? And a lot of fun to be had down
I got a text this morning from, I won't tell you who, but they said, hey, can you ask them if they can do a weed section in the stadium for us?
I'll leave that to the city of Cleveland. I'll leave that to the owners. And but let me say this. What you mentioned, it is interesting. Yes, let me go back in history real quick on the syntax. In 1991, we applied a beverage and cigarette tax to get Gateway built, right? It was $0.015 on a beer is the best way to think of it, okay? What that is it's fixed in that time. Well, inflation, price of goods, everything else goes up, and it's stuck in time. Also, as things mature, you need more improvement dollars, but the arena and the ballpark are newer than actually the Brown Stadium itself, Huntington Field. So we need to adjust it because we did need to keep up with inflation. And the geniuses that didn't adjust for inflation, wow, why didn't you do that? What weren't you thinking? So that does need to get adjusted. For us, then, let's flip back to the Brown Stadium. You got to situate. And by the way, to your question about marijuana tax, I frankly think there are better uses than using it on jails, which is what I'm hearing the state legislature talk about. I think for sports, for the arts,
they've been jailing people schools, for years because of marijuana.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a weird irony to all that, isn't there? I think things that drive entertainment, that drive new dollars to a town, whether it's bed tax and tourism dollars or whether it's income tax, probably better to seed it with that kind of thing than just building the jails out of it. Let me go back to the harbor front. I mean, I know this is a very serious conversation. There's people all over the map on this. I get it. But I mentioned the manufacturing opportunities and the aviation expansion opportunities out of Brook Park. But let's look at the downtown harbor front. And I've shared this with Jimmy and Dave and everybody else at the Browns. The reality is we should get this stadium a few more years out of this because it is not gone past its useful life. To have $117 million in capital repair needs is normal course for what we're seeing at the arena and the ballpark as well.
You're talking immediate needs, right?
Yeah, but then what we should be doing, and I say to the chamber, if anybody's listening to your great show here on Sunday morning, go work on our behalf now to get Burke taken down tomorrow. You mentioned how many years. I walked with Mayor Richard Daley down the 9th Street Pier. I took him to a meeting at the Rock Hall. He literally looked at me and he said, get rid of that. It's corporate welfare. That's what he said at the Burke Lakefront Airport. He'd just gotten rid of MIGs. I salute that guy for the way he did it. We have to pay back a few bonds to get there, but the guy got it done, right? And he got out there, he bulldozed MIGs. I'm going to a concert there this weekend with my nephew in Chicago. It's
for the record, for legal purposes, Chris Ronayne is not suggesting anyone take bulldozers to the runways at Burke Lakefront Airport. I just want to put that out there for legal purposes.
That's right, and thank you for protecting me. I can still dream about it, but so
I was trying to help you out.
To protect. But listen, I was sort of ringside view of a conversation with the mayor and with the Haslams where the west side of Burke was actually offered on the table. That is impressive that the city, now he's got to go through council, and I see Chris Harsh still sitting in the studio, but let's just say hypothetically, they get that. They get there. So get this thing done downtown, get it fixed up, start planning a new future. This is not about not having a dome downtown. You can have that at the west end of Burke. When Burke is gone, use my county airport, our county airport, to relieve the aviation service. That's the win-win-win. Manufacturing and aviation out in Brook Park, a stadium renovation here, a new stadium of the future that expands, doubles, triples our harbor front like Baltimore has. You got marinas out there. What's not to like about that experience? And everybody has this can't-do attitude about Burke. Look, go after it with the president and with, I think, our vice president, who happened to be our last senator in Ohio. Let's go for it. Let's go for it, and let's take that down. Look, we got to do that either way, but the stadium does give us a rationale to get moving on it fast.
Chris Ronayne, kind enough to hang in here and put up with me for another segment. Chris, let's jump back into the lakefront thing for a second, because you brought up that, yeah, if the Haslams went along with the plan, which I called it the Hail Mary plan, and that is we'll pump $500 million with a B into the existing stadium to keep that thing going until Burke can become available, and we can build a dome there. And that dome's probably going to cost around $4 billion with a B. So quick math, that's $4.5 billion. Infrastructure, I don't even want to speculate on that. I'm sure it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars to reconfigure that whole thing. And you said the county would support such a plan.
Right.
I think it just, for me, it's bananas to think of those dollar figures versus the $2.4 billion the Haslams are willing to spend. Basically that, I'm going to say 2.2, because it's 1.2 plus 800 million for phase one of the development. Let's be honest about phase two in Brook Park is, we'll see what happens. And usually when phase two gets proposed with projects, that rarely happens. So,
I started every segment giving a shout out our veterans, our family, our neighbors. I want to give a shout out to the Cleveland building trades too. They are, in a place right now where I understand they're looking at jobs. Jobs are precious. We need the jobs. But for the building trades, these jobs are going to be ongoing on all three facilities because there are capital need repairs. But here's the thing, Daryl, and again, I'm biasly a pro Browns guy. I always have been. I told Jimmy and Dee,
you are wearing a brownie.
Look, it's all tattered and torn. This is
probably from the 1980s.
This is at least 30 years old, right?
Isn't that the hoodie that Bernie used to wear?
I went out golfing in it this morning with my son. We're the poor man's golf team. Listen, when I was a kid, I sold ice cream down to the stadium. When I was a college student, I rolled tarps out in Berea. This is back when they were practicing at whatever given temperature. But it's not just emotional. It is actually fiscal, and I've sort of peppered my fiscal arguments on this all the way around. But there is something that we got to acknowledge with all this. When the Browns, if they were to go to Brook Park, it's a generational decision, right? Mm-hmm. Losing them from the downtown for however many decades out that or permanent, is a permanent loss for the city of Cleveland. And I want to say, Jimmy D, Browns senior leadership team, give this a second look. Give downtown a second look, because what you mentioned about costs and what I mentioned about jobs, the jobs will be ongoing, but we had always only planned to use the syntax escalation to support the Browns stadium, whether it's new build or whether it is existing structure. My proposal is, let's get that in place. Again, willingness of the voters. Let's do it downtown. All the polling is showing, by the way, that the fans at large are largely against the move out to Brook Park. And that hurts the ability to get those revenues in because people aren't going to vote for it. And that hurts the Cavs and the Guards by association. So what I'm saying is there's enough generated. Now it's about $4.5 million a year. In the future, it's about $15 million a year to make the repairs and start banking for a future of a new stadium downtown. The other thing is, we got to look at real design solutions. I mean, the Browns themselves have talked about dome-ready infrastructure on the existing facility. People may croak at that, but if you reskin this, because that's the worst part of this facility, is the exterior skin, and you actually did make that dome-ready infrastructure happen, you could place that dome on that structure. But I still think the win-win is in the harbor front on the east side where Burke is now. And let's not lose the momentum on the lakefront. Let's not lose the Browns for an entire generation, if not a lifetime. And this is nothing against Brook Park. Everybody in Brook Park is Browns fans too. But Brook Park has a higher and better land use in the future. I'm sure Mayor Orcutt's team might be listening to you today out here. We want to say we want to work with you for job development out there. Win-win is keeping them here, not losing them generationally to another place. and starting to plan for a new future, because every facility in some time is going to need to start to think about what's next, right? But I mean, we did see a stadium that lasted a hell of a long time on the lakefront. We can argue too long back when with the old Muni Stadium, but it was built to last. And I believe the integrity of this structure.
Paint and wood used to fall in my hair when they'd shoot off fireworks.
And we looked around poles, right? But on top of it, this structure, as the analysts at Osborne have already said, is sound. And
but they got to inspect it every year. That was the one fine print they put in there. They said it needs a structural inspection every year.
It's true of Gateway too. We get an inspection every year. We get, we agree to what is fundable through the public and what is fundable through the private sector. And we need to do that. I think the big picture is an entire sports authority where you work on all three of these teams all the time with that treasury that finally puts to bed the city of Cleveland or Cuyahoga County or Brook Park that doesn't have the money necessarily to put repairs in a stadium there in the future, that puts to bed these Band-Aids we put on things and finally says, look, we've got a revenue stream that's permanent and that money comes in all the time. So I think the win-win-win here is stay downtown, build out Brook Park. And for us, we just keep saying that Haslam's do come back to the table. And with the legislature, I mean, again, I said they're confused, but I think they are actually, in a way, just trying to figure out what the roadmap is here. And so to the legislature, what we want is your support in downtown. We want your support to get the syntax enabled in the state budget this time out so that we can have money to use to actually make these improvements, because people do love their Cleveland Browns, but they also love their Guards and the Cavs. In that same poll, the Guards and the Cavs came up 90% favorability. That is impossible to achieve in most places, especially in elected life. But this is a town that loves to the tune of 90% their Guards and their Cavs. And look, they put a damn good product on the field and on the court, deep into the playoffs in both cases these last two seasons.
Well, those are the two buildings you want in your downtown cores, an arena and a ballpark, because they're used tremendously more in a football stadium. One of my grievances with this region is we're always last. And I think we risk being last once again. Whether you like it, whether I like it, is immaterial. But the NFL, the business model is changing, and these owners now, they want roofs on their buildings.
I look at it as we're first, though, because we were the first to reinvest in stadia downtown, and then Detroit came along, and then Indianapolis came along, and now Atlanta's coming along. I also think there's design solutions on the existing facility, but I think we were first in that, and I think really we're going to be going backwards a la Richfield if we do this. And I just think we have been leading on this. Let's build something for the future that makes sense for the Cleveland Browns. But this downtown can support a dome. If the argument for the NFL is about a dome, it can be built. You mentioned your father, and I don't know if he worked at Orange Avenue. I don't think we've thought big enough about south of Progressive Field. I was coming down Broadway Orange today, and I'm looking at it, and roads are movable. There are malleable parts of that plan. You could dig right into Orange Avenue and move it to the east, and you can have your Brown Stadium right next to Progressive Field. So there's a lot of different land plays out there. And I realize to the listener, a lot of this is confusing, and some of this is just, let's cut to the quick, do the first thing, the easiest thing. But I think in history, we'll look back and say, why do we do that?
This is and I mentioned this in the conversation with Chris Harsh earlier in the show. It was like the worst kept secret in the region that the Browns were looking at stadium sites. I brought up early in our conversation as well. Like, I kind of feel like everyone waited for the Browns to make a decision. And then when the decision wasn't what everyone else wanted them to make, now it's chum in the water. The Sharks are feasting on them right now. And my thing is, this should have been done already. Like, you and I shouldn't even be having this conversation right now. Why didn't back in, and I realized that
I came into office later, so
there was a change of administrations at the county level. There was a change in administration at the city level, but like, it just wasn't a priority for anyone until now. We're at 0 hour. We have to have an answer now. What I mean, just collectively, Browns, everyone has to have an answer now. There's no, the lease is up. Like, there has to be an answer. So why is everything being done here at the last minute?
Let me say, I can't speak for others. I can only speak for me. We came in a year later into the administration, but I've never wavered from this downtown plan. And frankly, some of the things we've done are going to actually enable even more downtown. The jail, as you referenced, is going to Garfield. And I'm really glad that Mayor Burke out there and his team at Garfield's accommodating us. 1,100 jobs is going to be a boon to Garfield. But it never really did belong downtown, right? And so opening up 7 acres off of the off of the downtown landscape. That 7 acres that opens up with the jail is huge. And we shared because it's between the convention center and the warehouse district. That convention center wants to grow. We're punching above our weight. Bed tax is up because we are having convention after convention here. Got 2 major ones coming this summer. And so I shared with the Haslams, look, this 7 acres here relates to 100 acres around the stadium, from the west side of the port to the east side over at Burke and Muni lot, and the south side, which is the county-owned land on the lakeside. I mean, we've got a spectacular future here. Why not be a part of it? I keep saying the same thing. Be a part of it. Don't flinch. Come back home.
If they get off the lake, though, that opens up other possibilities, does it not? Like if you can find somewhere else to put a stadium. All right, let's say you win, okay, and they can't do the Brook Park thing. How helpful are you going to be in finding them another home that doesn't involve the existing building?
Lakefront development and housing development on the lakefront happens faster with the stadium here. And that may sound illogical to some people.
That really does.
Ask the Waterfront Development Corporation Director, Scott Skinner. Ask him about that. The conversation that he's having with developers about this situation. The other thing is we've got 25 acres north that are ready to go now. That's
the parking lot, right?
Yeah, that's right. Okay. That's right. It should not be parking. Stack that structure. I still need a place to park. Right, though. Absolutely. But a sea of flat surface parking on the lakefront is the lowest use, in terms of uses. That needs to be hospitality.
It is a tailgate environment. I think that's
yeah, absolutely. I agree.
It's not like the ballpark arena environment where you're going downtown, you're popping in the bar beforehand or after. You know what I mean?
I don't disagree. As a tailgater out at Muni and also on the north side of the marginal over at Burke, I see that future still tailgating. And I think we got to make sure, actually, in the plan we did.
I don't know that tailgating's fun in a parking garage, though.
But the plan we did for the Haslams, and I was one of the ones who helped commission it, shows parking on the south side of Burke for exactly that. It is something that is who we are. Tailgating is who we are. And I agree with that. It's just those acres to the north of the stadium aren't necessarily best used on any given, year just for that, because of what you hold off. The thing you got to think about is the stadium itself. So they play out the lease through the 29 season. You've delayed lakefront development, by another 5 years, doing it. Why don't we start integrating a development plan with the Browns now, like they showed us? And I'm sorry, Daryl, I got to say it. Cleveland Browns, if anybody's listening, show your full lakefront plan. Chris Harsh mentioned it on the earlier segment. Show it. We've seen it in the public sector. The public should see it. I saw one image fly by recently. It was not, by the way, the fullest image of what this thing is. I mean, you've got a bridge that goes right to the stadium itself. You got housing all around it. Show your plan, Browns. I mean, come on. What are we holding back for?
Because they want to go to Brook Park.
Well, listen, and you talk parking, with all respect to the Haslam Sports Group. I think a lot of this is about parking revenues.
That's a big revenue stream. I know this will shock people, but billionaires like creating revenue streams.
Let me ask you though, why should the public pay for it? Why should the public pay for the privilege of paying $160? You're right, because the Haslam said to us, finally, we don't need your money, and we're holding them to their word.
You won.
We did. We did. That's one win, but the bigger win is keeping them here.
They're also committing with your win. They're now committing $2.4 billion of private money to this project. It'll be one of the largest projects in Northeast Ohio. Okay, between Bedrock, the airport, you're talking almost $9 billion in construction for 3 projects. Why is that a bad thing?
Look, we are proud. We saved the taxpayers $600 million. When they said we don't need it, that's a savings of $600 million to the taxpayers. So Browns go at it. But, again, this is a lot about revenues from parking, and $150, $160 for a parking space. When do you price your fans? When do you price your fans out of the market, from ticket prices to parking prices? And when is it just sort of jumping the shark in that, we are not going to publicly subsidize that kind of private gain and then socialize all the risk back on the public. We're just not going to do that. So I guess at this point, since we did have the win on the $600 million not needed by the county, let's say to the Browns, come home. Let's talk about what we have talked about as sources that can help you if it's downtown, and let's get the right thing done. Listen, I respect your point of view, and I respect fans' point of view who have a point of view that this is Brook Park is where they think it should go. respectfully, we got two things to do: protect taxpayers and do what we think is best for the region. I don't think we talk enough about the singles and doubles that can happen and do happen at the stadium. I'm a hockey coach, and one of the great things that Browns did after the OSU Michigan game that they hosted there, which was a great game, albeit in cold weather, but that's what we do in hockey, is they actually availed the stadium to youth hockey afterwards. I coached one of the games down there. Great game. We had an overtime game down there. Kids loved it. The way the Browns have used, the opportunity to help the public in the past is the way that I think our future looks. Look, I mean, I keep going back to this. Where is the there? In Brook Park and at the airport, there's an important there. It's a manufacturing site next to an airport and an important airport that needs to grow and breathe, right? I'm not sure that housing pencils out to start with, nor is there the market. They say at top of the market rents, they're going to get the same rents they get downtown out at Brook Park. I don't know about that. I don't know about that balcony overlooking the airport with the diesel fumes in the air. I just don't know about that. So I think you could end up with a stadium with a whole lot of parking that, charges public for airport parking and on game days overcharges for the parking that they provide for games. I just think you keep looking at this thing and it doesn't pencil, it doesn't square. So, to me, the case is clear. Stay downtown, stay the course, but don't say we can't do a dome. We can do this dome downtown. If that's where the NFL wants to go, I personally like a little sun in September on my face at a game, and I think we're getting it in October and November as well these days. But hey, and I like the Thursday night game that was referenced offline here, the snow globe game. But that's just me. We're going to do what the public wants, and we're going to do what the trends are going toward. But for us, what we're going to do first is protect the public from losing on a taxpayer deal that is a boondoggle.
Fair enough. That is Chris Ronayne. He is the county executive for Cuyahoga County, kind enough to join us in studio. Chris, thank you so much for your time and coming in today.